On February 17, 2021, a man was discovered lifeless inside room 814 of the Shah Palace Hotel in Baku. That man was Omar Latif, a Hamas engineer and tunnel expert whose sudden death would soon trigger whispers of intelligence operations and secret wars. The Azerbaijani authorities initially moved cautiously, describing the incident as an unexplained medical emergency. Yet hotel staff recalled the tense atmosphere, the sudden blackout in the corridor, and the way two silent figures checked out moments before the discovery. Latif had arrived in Baku 3 days earlier on a flight from Istanbul under a Jordanian passport. Surveillance cameras showed him meeting discreetly with businessmen, though investigators suspected these men were intermediaries for arms transactions and possible technology procurement related to underground warfare. When his body was wheeled through the lobby covered by a white sheet, whispers spread instantly. Who could orchestrate such an operation in the heart of Azerbaijan? And why would a man who specialized in tunnels die far from Gaza's underground labyrinth? The scene inside his hotel room was puzzling. The door showed no forced entry, valuables remained untouched, and his laptop was missing. For seasoned investigators, this suggested professionals at work, assassins who left no traces, just questions echoing through Baku's cold February night. For intelligence services across the Middle East, the sudden death of Omar Latif was no ordinary event. He was not merely an engineer. He was a master of subterranean warfare, a man whose tunnels shaped Gaza's resistance and frustrated Israeli military advances repeatedly. Latif's expertise went far beyond digging. He designed reinforced shafts capable of surviving airstrikes, created smuggling routes for weapons, and built hidden communication chambers. His technical mind transformed soil into a weapon, giving Hamas both protection and strategic reach beneath Israel's defenses. Thus, his death inside a Baku hotel carried global consequences. If he had been eliminated, it meant someone had penetrated Hamas's security veil and struck with precision. For regional powers, this signaled that clandestine wars were escalating into faraway, unsuspecting capitals. Israel had long declared tunnel engineers as strategic threats equivalent to missile specialists. Removing Latif could cripple underground logistics for years, yet the timing raised suspicions. Why now? Was there intelligence about an imminent operation, or was this part of a broader geopolitical bargain? In Washington, London, and Ankara, security desks monitored developments with unease. Azerbaijan was a sensitive chessboard, tied to Israel by energy trade, tied to Turkey by culture, and eyed by Iran with suspicion. Latif's body was no longer just a corpse, it was leverage. Who gained from Omar Latif's sudden demise in Baku? Did rival factions within Hamas fear his rising influence, or did Israel's shadow warriors decide the tunnels had finally grown too sophisticated, too threatening, to be left untouched in Gaza's shifting battlefield? Was Latif poisoned, suffocated, or silenced through some exotic device known only to operatives trained in laboratories of Tel Aviv? Or was he coerced into meeting, only to vanish in a carefully orchestrated disappearance disguised as natural death? Why Azerbaijan? Why a luxury hotel near the Caspian Sea rather than a war-torn alley in Rafah? Was this neutral ground chosen for deniability, or did intelligence agencies consider Baku a convenient stage for their invisible chess game? And finally, was this just one assassination among many, or a signal that subterranean warfare had become so critical that world powers were prepared to kill in faraway capitals? In espionage, questions linger long after bodies vanish into cold morgues. Omar Latif was born in 1976 in Khan Yunis, a crowded refugee camp in southern Gaza. His family lived in a cramped concrete shelter, surrounded by dust, scarcity, and the persistent echo of conflict that shaped every childhood memory. His father, a laborer who once worked construction jobs in Israel, instilled discipline and resilience. His mother, a quiet but devout woman, emphasized education, pressing him to excel in mathematics and engineering, even as Israeli curfews and blockades disrupted normal schooling. The streets of Khan Yunis were both his playground and his education. He saw funerals of militants, drone strikes overhead, and the smuggling tunnels that carried food and medicine. These tunnels fascinated him, becoming symbols of survival and ingenuity. As a boy, Latif built makeshift tunnels with friends, burrowing beneath alleys for games. Yet even then, Neighbors whispered that his determination was unusual. Unlike others, he meticulously reinforced walls, measuring soil with sticks, displaying early traits of a future engineer. Despite harsh surroundings, he won scholarships to attend technical courses in Gaza City. Teachers remembered him as quiet, precise, and obsessed with structures. He could spend hours sketching designs, talking about concrete mixes, and imagining systems that might endure bombardment and collapse. The late 1980s and early 1990s shaped his worldview. The First Intifada erupted when he was 12, exposing him to protest, tear gas, and arrests. Resistance was not abstract. It was lived daily, and Omar absorbed it with impressionable intensity. His teenage years were marked by contradictions. A studious young man who quietly excelled in physics, yet also a restless spirit shaped by checkpoints and humiliation. His notebooks contained both equations and angry poetry about borders, walls, and stolen dignity. By his late teens, Omar was already known locally as someone different, disciplined, intelligent, and determined. While many peers drifted toward gangs or idleness, he turned to knowledge. Knowledge, he believed, was the weapon that could shift balance against overwhelming military power. Omar Latif's ideology formed not in lecture halls, but in alleys of Gaza. He came to see tunnels not only as survival tools, but as political weapons, proof that ingenuity could challenge tanks, drones, and heavily fortified border fences. He admired the writings of Hassan al-Banna and Sayyid Qutb, yet unlike fiery preachers, Omar was no orator. He preferred blueprints over speeches, bolts over slogans. His contribution to Hamas would always be silent, technical, and profoundly destructive. Relatives recalled his peculiar habits. He carried graph paper everywhere, sketching arches, slopes, and reinforcement angles during meals. He often hummed quietly when calculating. When anxious, he tapped his fingers in sequences of 3, like mimicking structural rhythms. Despite his austere appearance, Omar had quirks. He disliked tea but consumed bitter coffee obsessively, claiming it sharpened concentration. He never wore wristwatches, saying time in Gaza was measured by raids, sirens, and lulls between bombardments, not ticking mechanical seconds. Though deeply religious, he was not ostentatious. He prayed on time but rarely lectured others. He fasted with strict discipline, yet spent Ramadan nights discussing soil density rather than sermons. For him, science and faith were intertwined tools of defiance. Among peers, Omar appeared withdrawn, even cold. Yet children admired his patience. He once spent hours building toy bridges for neighborhood kids. Neighbors whispered that beneath his sternness was empathy, though always cloaked by the relentless logic of an engineer. Within Hamas circles, Omar Latif earned the nickname Al-Muhandis al-Samiti, the silent engineer. Unlike fiery commanders who boasted in speeches, he preferred to remain invisible. Silence, he believed, preserved effectiveness. The fewer who knew his methods, the stronger the tunnels became. Israeli intelligence reportedly referred to him as the Mole, a codename suggesting his subterranean expertise and elusiveness. The name spread informally in Gaza, whispered with both admiration and fear, symbolizing how his identity was merging with the underground labyrinth he designed. Latif himself saw tunnels as extensions of his being. He once told a confidant, "Walls can be broken, skies are owned by drones, but the earth belongs to those who shape it." His self-image fused with soil. By his late 30s, he cultivated an aura of myth. To supporters, he was a quiet genius shaping resistance. To enemies, he was an invisible adversary. Omar embraced both images, convinced legends were as important as weapons in asymmetric warfare. The shift from student to militant engineer did not happen overnight. Omar Latif initially dreamed of becoming a civil engineer working abroad, but Gaza's collapsing economy, blockades, and recurring wars ensured that his skills would inevitably be absorbed into resistance networks. By the mid-1990s, recruiters from Hamas noticed his unusual abilities. He was not fiery, not radical in speech, but precise in execution. They asked him to help design fortified safe houses. He quietly agreed, marking his first technical collaboration. Latif's role deepened after the Second Intifada erupted in 2000. When Israel intensified incursions into Gaza, Hamas needed new methods of survival. Latif proposed tunnels, concealed passages not merely for smuggling, but for launching raids and moving fighters undetected. His growing involvement blurred the line between civilian expertise and militant purpose. At first, he framed it as defense, protecting families, sheltering fighters. Over time, it became offense, designing shafts for rocket storage, command bunkers, and cross-border assault routes into Israel. By 2005, after Israel's withdrawal from Gaza, Latif was no longer a quiet technician on the margins. He had become a crucial strategist, sought after by Hamas leadership. Politics mattered less to him than engineering, yet his influence carried unmistakable political weight. Though never holding a formal political office, Latif understood that each design had consequences. A tunnel was both an engineering marvel and a statement of defiance. In joining Hamas, he did not simply choose militancy, he chose to weaponize his mind, forever. Omar Latif's first brushes with the law came in the late 1990s, before he was fully embedded in Hamas structures. Israeli patrols arrested him twice for curfew violations, interrogating him briefly before release. Even then, his meticulous silence unnerved officers. In 1999, Israeli intelligence linked him to a small tunnel discovered beneath Rafah. The shaft was crude, lacking reinforcement, but locals insisted Omar had advised its builders. Authorities detained him for weeks, questioning his involvement, though evidence remained circumstantial and inconclusive. The second major arrest came during the Second Intifada in 2001. Omar was seized near Deir al-Balah after surveillance suggested he transported equipment disguised as agricultural supplies. He maintained innocence, but hidden beneath fertilizer sacks were generators, cables, and reinforced steel beams. Israeli prosecutors sought heavy charges, arguing Latif's expertise threatened regional security. Yet the court lacked definitive proof he designed operational tunnels. Released after months in detention, Omar returned home embittered. Friends recalled he emerged more determined, convinced arrest only confirmed his importance to resistance. Local Gaza police also monitored him. After a 2003 firefight, Palestinian Authority officers briefly detained Omar, accusing him of aiding Hamas logistics. He denied it, calling himself an engineer, not a militant. But his name circulated increasingly among intelligence files. By the mid-2000s, Omar's encounters with law enforcement shaped his reputation. To supporters, arrests proved his value. To enemies, they underscored his growing danger. Latif walked free repeatedly, but each release drew him deeper into the shadows where law ended and militancy thrived. During his 2001 detention, Omar Latif claimed he endured severe interrogation techniques. Former cellmates later recalled his quiet resilience, describing beatings, sleep deprivation, and long hours of blinding light. These experiences, they said, transformed his silence into something far more formidable. Omar rarely spoke of his ordeal publicly, but among trusted circles, he described learning patience inside those walls. Every question unanswered, every plan withheld, became training. For him, prison was not humiliation. It was rehearsal for future underground struggles. Rumors circulated that Israeli interrogators attempted psychological pressure by displaying blueprints of captured tunnels. They demanded he explain weak points. Omar allegedly smiled faintly and refused. This act of defiance fed into his myth as an unbreakable subterranean strategist. After release, whispers of torture hardened his status within Hamas. He was seen as a man tempered in fire, his resolve sharpened by suffering. For Omar, scars were not deterrents. They became silent endorsements of his loyalty and endurance. By the early 2000s, Omar Latif had moved from peripheral supporter to full participant within Hamas. His unique knowledge of engineering and geology made him indispensable. Unlike fighters who carried rifles, he carried blueprints, diagrams, and formulas that redefined underground warfare. Hamas leadership quickly recognized his talent. Latif was assigned to the Izz ad-Din al-Qassam brigades, where he quietly became part of a specialized engineering unit. His role was not glamorous but foundational. He created the hidden arteries sustaining operations. In 2004, amid escalating clashes, Latif reportedly helped design one of the first large-scale smuggling tunnels under Rafah. These passageways funneled weapons, medicine, and goods, bypassing Israeli and Egyptian controls. His fingerprints were invisible, yet every successful transfer echoed his precision. As trust deepened, Hamas allowed him to mentor younger recruits in engineering principles. He rarely lectured directly, but instead demonstrated with soil samples, reinforcing rods, and sketches. Students said he treated tunnel construction like sacred ritual, demanding silence, accuracy, and absolute discretion. Latif's reputation grew beyond Gaza. Reports suggested he collaborated with Hezbollah operatives, studying Lebanese bunker systems during discreet trips. Whether myth or truth, these claims strengthened his stature. He was no longer a local builder but a transnational strategist. By the mid-2000s, whispers emerged that Latif was considering a breakaway unit focused exclusively on subterranean innovation. Though the idea never materialized as a formal faction, his circle of loyal engineers operated semi-independently, a shadow cadre within Hamas devoted only to tunnels. By 2006, Omar Latif's tunnels were no longer simple passageways for goods. They became arteries of war. Israeli officials noted an escalation in weapons smuggling. Anti-tank missiles, explosives, and rifles flowed beneath Rafah's soil with remarkable efficiency, coordinated through Latif's engineering brilliance. Latif's tunnels also enabled kidnappings. The most famous case was the abduction of Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit in June 2006. Though not the mastermind, intelligence reports suggested Latif advised on tunnel construction used in the raid, reinforcing Hamas's tactical reliance on him. With kidnappings came killings. Fighters launched surprise attacks from concealed shafts, ambushing patrols, retreating underground like phantoms. For Israeli soldiers, Latif's designs became synonymous with sudden death. For Hamas, they represented empowerment, a way to shift balance against overwhelming firepower. The Egyptian border also became compromised. Smuggling networks extended deep into Sinai, facilitated by Latif's reinforced structures. What once transported medicine now carried rockets, detonators, and even vehicles in disassembled form. Each passage blurred lines between civilian need and militarized ambition, tightening regional security concerns. Israeli intelligence increasingly flagged Latif as a priority target. He was no longer just an engineer. He was an architect of asymmetric warfare. His tunnels enabled Hamas to fight, kidnap, and kill, while evading traditional battlefield detection. Latif had become indispensable. On June 25, 2006, militants used a tunnel near Kerem Shalom to ambush an Israeli tank unit. 2 soldiers were killed. Gilad Shalit was captured. Israeli investigators later traced the tunnel's design back to Omar Latif's engineering cell, reinforcing suspicions of his involvement. In January 2008, another incident unfolded. A massive underground breach collapsed sections of Gaza's border with Egypt. Thousands of Palestinians poured into Sinai. Though presented as spontaneous, intelligence indicated Latif designed structural weaknesses to facilitate the breach under cover of necessity. In March 2010, a tunnel under Khan Yunis collapsed during construction. 4 militants died. Survivors revealed they had been following Latif's blueprints, using imported steel beams. Israeli analysts realized his methods were increasingly sophisticated, turning crude shafts into near-professional subterranean infrastructures. By August 2014, during Operation Protective Edge, Israeli forces discovered a network of attack tunnels penetrating into Israeli territory. Engineers documented reinforced concrete walls, power lines, and ventilation systems. Every feature pointed toward Latif's signature style, precision disguised beneath the chaos of war. In December 2017, another tunnel collapsed near Rafah, killed fighters linked to Islamic Jihad. Rumors swirled that Latif's methods had been shared or sold beyond Hamas. Whether true or not, the legend of his underground empire now stretched across Gaza's factions. Each incident escalated Latif's notoriety. His fingerprints appeared not as evidence in court, but as whispers in intelligence briefings, diagrams in seized files, and reinforced shafts beneath the ground. Step by step, his work transformed Gaza into a labyrinth of clandestine war. By 2010, Omar Latif's name began appearing on Israeli intelligence dossiers marked with red stamps. He was no longer just an engineer in Gaza. He was labeled a strategic threat. the kind of figure whose elimination justified years of surveillance. The United States also quietly flagged him. Declassified cables later revealed concerns that Latif's tunnels enabled weapons smuggling from Iran through Sinai. His name appeared on internal watch lists, though Washington stopped short of issuing a public designation to avoid escalation. Egypt, too, regarded him warily. Officials in Cairo knew tunnels under Rafah weakened state authority and empowered militant groups in Sinai. Egyptian military intelligence allegedly compiled files on Latif, describing him as the hidden architect undermining borders with every underground passage. Within Hamas, his notoriety was double-edged. Leaders prized his genius, but his growing fame made him a liability. A man who lived in shadows was now becoming a symbol. That visibility, paradoxically, increased his risk of targeted assassination dramatically. By 2015, Israel publicly accused Hamas of building terror tunnels designed for mass infiltration. Though not named directly, Latif's reputation circulated in press leaks and think tank reports. To many, he was already Gaza's equivalent of Hezbollah's underground strategists. Intelligence veterans later admitted that placing Latif on most wanted lists meant one thing: inevitability. Once listed, names rarely disappeared except through arrest or death. Latif's life had crossed a threshold. Every movement abroad, every hotel booking, would now be traced, flagged, and hunted. The first suspected attempt came in 2012, when an airstrike leveled a house in Khan Yunis, where Latif was believed to be meeting. 6 militants died, but Omar escaped, reportedly having left the building minutes earlier under unexplained circumstances. In 2014, during Operation Protective Edge, Israeli drones targeted tunnel shafts, where Latif was allegedly supervising construction. Precision strikes killed several engineers, but again, Latif survived. Hamas insiders whispered that he shifted locations constantly, never sleeping in the same place twice. By 2016, Mossad reportedly considered poison. Leaked accounts suggested agents sought to lace imported equipment with toxins, smuggled under the guise of construction supplies. The plan allegedly failed when shipments were intercepted at checkpoints before reaching Latif's subterranean network. In 2018, Israeli operatives allegedly attempted cyber-sabotage. Malware was introduced into communication systems used by Hamas engineers. Computers malfunctioned, schematics vanished, yet Latif remained cautious. He distrusted digital storage, preferring notebooks. This paranoia saved him, frustrating foreign agencies attempting precision elimination. A 2019 car bombing in Rafah raised further suspicion. The vehicle exploded as militants entered, killing 2 operatives. Some claimed Omar was the intended passenger. Others dismissed it as factional violence. Yet intelligence analysts continued circling his name with red ink. Each near miss deepened his myth. Supporters said Allah protected him. Enemies described him as slippery, a phantom beneath the earth. Yet for Mossad and Shin Bet, survival only proved one thing: Latif's elimination would require extraordinary measures, far beyond routine strikes. By the early 2020s, even allies whispered that Omar Latif's fate was sealed. He had evaded too many strikes, survived too many close calls. His name carried a target that could not be erased, only postponed temporarily through relentless caution. Intelligence circles described him as marked. Analysts compared his trajectory to other eliminated figures: Imad Mughnieh in Damascus, Mahmoud al-Mabhouh in Dubai. Every file review concluded with the same phrase: his death was not a question of if, but when. Inside Gaza, Latif himself seemed to accept this inevitability. He traveled rarely, spoke sparingly, and trusted only a handful of associates. Yet even his silence betrayed awareness. The more carefully he moved, the louder destiny stalked behind him. In shadows of Baku, inevitability finally met opportunity. His decision to leave Gaza, to enter foreign hotels and anonymous lobbies, signaled the narrowing of choices. For Mossad, the patient hunter, the window had opened. Omar Latif's story was approaching its endgame. The story of Omar Latif cannot be separated from Gaza itself. Since 1948, the Strip has been a crucible of displacement, siege, and war. For generations, families lived amid cycles of intifada, bombardment, and blockades that shaped both survival and ideology. By the 1980s, Hamas emerged as a dominant force, blending political Islam with militant resistance. The tunnels Latif later engineered were not just structures, they were born from decades of military occupation, sealed borders, and an economy suffocated by external control. Israel viewed these tunnels as existential threats. Each passageway risked infiltration, kidnapping, or arms transfers. Military planners feared not only rockets, but sudden eruptions of fighters from beneath the ground. Latif's designs became emblematic of this subterranean asymmetric threat pressing Israel's borders. Meanwhile, Palestinian factions considered tunnels as lifelines. They bypassed embargoes, carried food, medicine, and at times contraband. Latif's innovations blurred humanitarian necessity with militarized defiance, ensuring every shaft became both a lifeline for civilians and a potential launchpad for armed confrontation. The broader conflict intensified after 2007, when Hamas seized control of Gaza from Fatah. Israel imposed harsher restrictions, while militants dug deeper. The deeper they dug, the higher Latif's importance grew, linking his biography with the unresolved war's ever-widening cycle. Israel's stance was unambiguous. For Tel Aviv, Omar Latif represented a direct national security threat. Defense officials placed his name alongside rocket engineers and commanders, arguing tunnels gave Hamas capabilities equivalent to conventional armies. Neutralizing him became not strategy but existential necessity. The United States maintained a more cautious position. Washington condemned tunnel operations as destabilizing, but American officials rarely named Latif directly. Still, intelligence cooperation with Israel ensured his profile circulated across agencies, a quiet acknowledgement of his growing role in asymmetric warfare. Egypt, sharing the Rafah border, viewed Latif with hostility. His tunnels undermined Cairo's authority, fueling smuggling networks in Sinai. Egyptian generals accused Hamas engineers of aiding jihadist groups indirectly. Latif became, in their eyes, an invisible enemy threatening Egypt's fragile security balance. Iran, conversely, admired figures like Latif. Tehran provided training, funds, and technology, seeing Gaza's underground war as an extension of its regional influence. Though no evidence confirmed Latif visited Iran, officials celebrated tunnel engineers as proof resistance could innovate against overwhelming adversaries. Turkey and Qatar adopted ambiguous positions. Both supported Hamas politically and financially, but distanced themselves from militant operations. Still, analysts believed Latif's travels through Istanbul and Doha signaled covert meetings, suggesting his expertise was quietly valued by these benefactors of Hamas. Azerbaijan's role was unexpected. Traditionally close to Israel through energy ties, Baku also maintained relations with Muslim movements abroad. Latif's presence in its capital raised uncomfortable questions. Was Azerbaijan neutral ground for covert meetings, or an arena silently exploited by competing intelligence services? Omar Latif mattered because he was not replaceable. Tunnel engineers existed, but few combined technical mastery with ideological conviction. His blueprints fused science and militancy, transforming soil into a strategic weapon. For Hamas, he was less a man than an infrastructure. Israel recognized this uniqueness. Rockets could be intercepted, commanders replaced, but tunnels required deep expertise. Latif's designs meant operations could continue under bombardment, fighters could move unseen, and supply chains could survive sieges. Eliminating him promised to cripple Hamas's most elusive advantage. For Palestinians in Gaza, Latif embodied ingenuity under siege. Families used tunnels for medicine and food, and his reputation linked survival with defiance. Though controversial, he symbolized resilience, a reminder that even blockades could be pierced through human resourcefulness and risk. Regionally, Latif's role mattered because tunnels destabilized balances of power. Egypt feared Sinai smuggling, Israel feared border breaches, and Iran celebrated subterranean defiance. Each tunnel became a geopolitical statement, and behind nearly all of them whispered intelligence reports pointed to Omar Latif's unseen hand. Globally, his significance extended to counter-terrorism paradigms. Latif was proof that warfare was no longer confined to missiles or battlefields. Subterranean warfare, pioneered by his genius, forced militaries to invest billions in detection, sensors, and countermeasures. His impact reshaped military doctrines worldwide. Ultimately, Omar Latif mattered because his very existence blurred lines between engineer and militant, survival and aggression, infrastructure and weapon. His death in Baku did not simply remove a man, it symbolized the end of an era in Gaza's underground war. On February 14, 2021, 3 days before Omar Latif's death, flights landed quietly at Haydar Aliyev International Airport in Baku. Among passengers were men and women using forged European passports, their movements ordinary, yet meticulously choreographed under layers of operational cover. 2 operatives traveled via Turkish Airlines from Istanbul, carrying Belgian documentation. Another pair arrived from Vienna on Austrian Airlines, presenting German passports. Their staggered arrivals avoided suspicion, yet intelligence later pieced together identical booking patterns, revealing orchestration beneath apparent randomness. Airport cameras showed nothing unusual. They smiled at customs, rolled modest luggage, and booked taxis separately. Yet investigators later noted one common detail. Each traveler carried a single slim briefcase, unremarkable to ordinary eyes, essential to covert professionals preparing missions. The group blended into Baku's cosmopolitan fabric. The city, known for hosting oil executives and diplomats, provided anonymity. Operatives checked into different hotels across the city, never staying together. Yet intelligence analysis confirmed shared routes, coded calls, and late-night meetings at quiet cafes. Local security services remained unaware. Azerbaijan's capital, often a silent stage for rival intelligence agencies, provided the perfect arena. Mossad's operatives, if indeed they were Mossad, had arrived. Their quarry was already inside the Shah Palace Hotel, Omar Latif, the silent engineer. On February 15th, 2 operatives checked into the Shah Palace Hotel, presenting themselves as European business consultants. Their passports, later discovered to be fraudulent, carried flawless biometric chips. Hotel staff remembered them as courteous, unremarkable. Precisely the camouflage that professionals required. One operative requested a room 2 floors below Omar Latif, while another insisted on a corner suite facing the courtyard. Their positioning offered visual lines into corridors and easy access to stairwells, minimizing reliance on elevators that attracted attention. Meanwhile, 2 additional operatives booked rooms in a nearby boutique hotel. They posed as journalists covering energy markets. Each day, they lingered in the Shah Palace Cafe, sipping tea, monitoring Latif's comings and goings with disciplined regularity and photographic memory. Inside the Shah Palace, surveillance unfolded with subtlety. Operatives deployed disguised devices, a charger adapter doubling as a miniature microphone, a smoke detector carrying a hidden lens. Latif's keycard usage was cloned within hours, granting invisible entry without breaching locks. Hotel staff saw nothing unusual. Latif dined quietly, ordered coffee, and made calls from his room. But every movement, every lift ride, every hallway pause was logged by watchers who never broke cover. The silent engineer was already surrounded, though unaware. February 17th began with calm routine. At 8:12 a.m., Omar Latif left his room briefly for breakfast. Surveillance noted he ordered strong coffee, bread, and fruit. He appeared withdrawn, scanning newspapers, unaware his final hours were already scheduled. By 10:05 a.m., he returned upstairs. 2 operatives followed separately, one using the elevator, another the stairwell. Their timing ensured overlapping coverage. Hotel cameras captured only ordinary guests. In reality, layers of silent pursuit had tightened around Latif's every movement. At 1:20 p.m., Latif met 2 men in the lobby, believed to be intermediaries for procurement discussions. He spoke briefly, shook hands, and departed. Surveillance teams photographed the encounter, transmitting images instantly to handlers monitoring remotely from encrypted channels. By 5 p.m., Latif was back in his room. Operatives confirmed through cloned keycards that he had locked himself inside. One surveillance agent lingered in the corridor, disguised as a maintenance technician, ensuring no unexpected disturbances would disrupt the operation. At 7:40 p.m., lights on the 8th floor flickered. Witnesses later recalled a brief power cut. This blackout, lasting 47 seconds, was engineered. Within that window, operatives entered room 814 silently, their actions synchronized with almost cinematic precision. By 8:30 p.m., Latif was no longer answering calls. Associates assumed he was resting. But inside the Shah Palace Hotel, an invisible strike had concluded. The silent engineer's final day had ended not with chaos, but with calculated silence. Operatives combined human intelligence with technical tradecraft, forged documents, encrypted communications, surveillance mosaics, and carefully timed logistics. Specialists coordinated flights, local proxies, safe houses, and payments through shell companies, creating an operational bubble designed to render their presence invisible seamlessly. Inside hotels, technicians used subtle devices, cloned keycards to bypass locks, modified chargers concealing microphones and lenses, and fixtures repurposed as observation nodes. The team avoided brute force, preferring layered stealth that let them watch rooms for days unnoticed continuously. A narrow selection of incapacitating methods existed, deployed discreetly to mimic natural failure. Investigators later described a sudden respiratory collapse consistent with exposure to a potent agent, yet the absence of overt trauma made medical conclusions contested and convenient deniability. Cyber operators complemented physical tradecraft by degrading CCTV logs, corrupting server timestamps, and injecting false footage. Encrypted channels transmitted live feeds to handlers abroad. These measures ensured the operation could be observed, while creating plausible gaps in the hotel's digital records. After the act, operatives executed an austere exfiltration plan, staggered departures, destroyed SIM cards, and prearranged extraction routes to the airport. False identities dissolved into transit crowds. Staged death would appear natural, slipping from courts into diplomatic denials and shadows. At 7:42 p.m., an unexpected guest stepped off the elevator, an Azerbaijani businessman heading toward room 816. For a brief moment, the corridor nearly exposed the operation. One operative adjusted tools swiftly, disguising intrusion as routine electrical maintenance. Minutes later, a maid pushed her cart toward the 8th floor. Surveillance intercepted her, delaying her entry by requesting linen for another room. The pause lasted just long enough. Had she arrived sooner, discovery would have been inevitable. Operatives described these moments later as razor-thin margins. One unplanned knock, one suspicious glance, and the operation risked collapse. Yet every potential disruption folded into choreography. The strike proceeded, hidden in plain sight under fluorescent hotel lights. Inside room 814, silence dominated. Outside, guests poured wine, laughed in restaurants, and discussed oil contracts. The operatives knew exposure was seconds away at all times. Yet precision, patience, and nerves of steel held the illusion intact. At 7:45 p.m., operatives entered room 814. Omar Latif sat near the desk, reviewing notes. He turned briefly, surprised, but no sound escaped. A swift application of an unknown agent ended his consciousness within seconds. The act was clinical, leaving no signs of struggle. His body slumped naturally, head resting against the chair. Operatives wiped surfaces, repositioned objects to appear untouched, and removed his laptop, a silent theft hidden within staged normalcy. At 7:52 p.m., the team exited during the blackout interval. Within minutes, power returned, lights flickered on, and the corridor appeared undisturbed. Latif remained inside, lifeless, as though overcome by a sudden private medical failure. By midnight, paramedics carried him from the Shah Palace Hotel. Official records listed cardiac arrest as the cause. For investigators, absence of bruises or forced entry suggested mystery. For Mossad, if indeed Mossad, it marked completion of a mission, invisible yet final. On the morning of February 18, 2021, housekeeping staff entered room 814 after repeated knocks went unanswered. Inside, they found Omar Latif motionless at the desk. His posture appeared calm, almost sleeping, yet his body was already cold and lifeless. Hotel management immediately alerted local police. Officers sealed the corridor, interviewing staff and guests. Early reports described no forced entry, no missing valuables, and no signs of struggle. To authorities, it looked disturbingly like a sudden, unexplained natural death. Word spread quickly through Baku. Guests whispered of sirens outside the Shah Palace. By midday, journalists gathered in the lobby, sensing something larger than a medical episode. A Hamas figure had died quietly in Azerbaijan. Questions multiplied instantly. By evening, Azerbaijani officials released a brief statement. A foreign guest had died of apparent cardiac complications. Yet whispers circulated in diplomatic circles almost immediately. Too much secrecy surrounded the body, too much urgency in silencing speculation about foul play. Omar Latif's body was transferred to a state medical facility in Baku. Official reports initially listed cardiac arrest, but forensic specialists noted inconsistencies. Minimal coronary damage, no prior history of heart disease, and subtle traces suggesting possible chemical interference within his bloodstream. Toxicology samples were quietly dispatched for further analysis. Analysts discovered faint markers of an unidentifiable compound, volatile, fast-degrading, and nearly impossible to trace. These anomalies sparked debate. Was it an exotic toxin, or merely residual contamination from ordinary pharmaceuticals? Azerbaijani officials maintained caution. Publicly, they repeated the heart failure explanation. Privately, they hesitated to release findings implicating assassination. The prospect of Mossad activity on Azerbaijani soil raised diplomatic sensitivities, given Israel's close partnership in trade and energy. Meanwhile, Hamas demanded answers. Representatives claimed Omar was healthy and active, dismissing natural death. They accused foreign agencies of poisoning. Yet with evidence evaporating rapidly, medical ambiguity became the perfect camouflage. Latif's body concealed secret science alone could not conclusively unlock. When investigators reviewed hotel CCTV footage, anomalies emerged. Several guests checked in with European passports days before Latif's death. Their faces appeared ordinary, but forensic scrutiny revealed patterns: staggered arrivals, shared movements, and synchronized departures. Hallmarks of a coordinated intelligence operation unfolding silently. One frame captured a man posing as a German businessman, entering Latif's corridor during the blackout. Another showed a woman with a Belgian passport lingering near elevators. Their identities collapsed quickly when Interpol confirmed no such passports existed legitimately. Diplomatic uproar followed. European capitals demanded explanations after forged documents bearing their emblems surfaced in Baku. The scandal echoed earlier Mossad operations, particularly the Dubai assassination of Mahmoud al-Mabhouh in 2010, where fake passports similarly exposed clandestine networks operating across neutral soil. Azerbaijani security services grew uneasy. Their own CCTV servers showed tampering, missing timestamps, corrupted footage. Cyber analysts concluded deliberate manipulation. Someone had erased evidence, leaving only fragments. The sophistication suggested professional intelligence, not criminal gangs. Once again, suspicion centered squarely on Israel's fabled clandestine service, yet no operative was captured. By the time questions arose, suspects had already vanished on flights to Vienna, Istanbul, and Warsaw. Their identities dissolved. Latif was gone. The Shah Palace had become another crime scene without criminals, just whispers. News of Omar Latif's mysterious death spread rapidly across Middle Eastern networks. Hamas issued statements condemning Israel, declaring Latif a martyr of the underground war. Crowds in Gaza mourned him as a hero, while Israeli officials maintained deliberate silence, neither confirming nor denying involvement. In Tehran, officials praised Latif's legacy and accused Mossad of executing another extrajudicial killing. Iranian state media amplified the narrative of resistance targeted abroad, portraying his death as evidence that Israel would cross borders to eliminate enemies without restraint. European governments reacted angrily to the passport scandal. Germany, Belgium, and Austria summoned Israeli diplomats, demanding accountability for the forged documents. Though accusations were met with denials, quiet expulsions of suspected intelligence officers followed, straining already fragile diplomatic relations. Azerbaijan faced delicate pressure. Baku valued its energy ties with Israel, yet did not wish to be seen as complicit. Officials emphasized neutrality, but opposition voices within parliament questioned whether their territory had become a stage for international covert warfare. Washington remained cautious. U.S. officials avoided naming Israel, but acknowledged Latif's elimination weakened Hamas infrastructure. Privately, analysts debated consequences. While removing a key engineer disrupted tunnels, it also risked martyring him, feeding further cycles of radicalization within Gaza's volatile population. Behind the assassinations, the forged passports, the blackouts, lies an invisible structure. Bureaucracies of espionage, Mossad, Shin Bet, Amman, operate like empires without maps. They recruit, budget, file reports, and yet their greatest currency is secrecy, hidden beneath layers of deniability. This phantom bureaucracy thrives in silence. Decisions emerge not through democratic debate, but whispered approvals in secure rooms. Operations like Baku's strike on Omar Latif are signed off by officials whose names never appear on press releases or parliamentary records. Each assassination is not merely tactical, it is administrative. Forms are filed, budgets allocated, flights scheduled. Somewhere, within beige offices in Tel Aviv, paper trails exist that authorize killings across continents, even as governments publicly deny involvement consistently. The bureaucracy sustains itself through ritual. Classified cables, encrypted phone calls, compartmentalized briefings, all serving a machinery that functions like shadow governance. Citizens remain unaware. Yet its presence shapes geopolitics more profoundly than speeches in parliaments or debates on diplomacy. From the bureaucracy flow the legions. They are not armies in uniforms but clusters of specialists. Forgers craft flawless passports. Surveillance officers blend into hotel lobbies. Cyber operatives corrupt servers. Each role functions as mythic archetypes within the clandestine pantheon. Some are known as ghosts, field officers trained to disappear in foreign capitals. Others are shadows, watchers who observe but never strike. The most feared are scalpels, assassins deployed only when diplomacy ends and elimination becomes sanctioned necessity. These legions never gather publicly. They exist as fragments, compartmentalized cells unaware of each other's missions. Yet together, they shape outcomes. In Baku, their combined precision ensured Omar Latif's death appeared less like murder and more like inevitability. The Baku operation was not without precedent. In 1997, Mossad agents attempted to assassinate Khalid Mashal in Amman using a nerve toxin. The mission unraveled, agents were caught, and Israel faced diplomatic humiliation, a reminder that even shadows sometimes stumble. In 2008, Imad Mughnieh, Hezbollah's military chief, was killed in Damascus when a car bomb detonated silently on a residential street. Syrian security services never solved it. Many suspected Mossad, some pointed to CIA cooperation. Official silence only deepened intrigue. Then came Dubai. In 2010, Mahmoud al-Mabhouh found dead in a luxury hotel. CCTV revealed operatives disguised as tennis players, businessmen and tourists. Forged passports exposed the network. Though Mossad never admitted responsibility, the methodical execution resembled Baku's eerie choreography. Each mission leaves behind fragments, blurred images, forged documents, missing minutes on surveillance tapes. None of these fragments alone prove culpability. Together, however, they form an unmistakable signature, an aesthetic of elimination where death is clinical, deniable, and staged as natural coincidence. In Baku, Omar Latif's fate became another chapter in this tradition. The operation echoed ghosts of Amman, Damascus, and Dubai, reminding the world that history repeats in shadows. Only the names change, while the methods remain chillingly familiar. Above the legions sit unseen architects, prime ministers, intelligence chiefs, security councils. They authorize operations like signatures of fate, balancing diplomacy against elimination. Their decisions remain sealed, yet their shadows linger over bodies found in distant hotel rooms without explanation. These leaders are not omnipotent gods but flawed men and women, vulnerable to miscalculation, arrogance, and ambition. Yet to operatives in the field, their word becomes law. Orders cascade downward, transforming whispered approval into silent death abroad. In Baku, Omar Latif's end was not personal vengeance. It was bureaucracy disguised as destiny, sanctioned by those gods behind curtains. Nations move pawns, sacrifice knights, and bury truths. Espionage, after all, thrives where accountability cannot reach. When Omar Latif's body was returned to Gaza, thousands filled the streets of Khan Yunis. Draped in Hamas flags, his coffin moved through alleys he once knew as a child. Chants framed him as martyr, engineer, and silent guardian beneath earth. Hamas leadership seized the moment. Speeches exalted Latif's tunnels as symbols of defiance, promising his death would not halt their subterranean warfare. Children carried posters with his image, transforming him from clandestine figure into public icon of resilience. Israel watched uneasily. Analysts debated whether killing Latif weakened Hamas operationally, but strengthened its narrative symbolically. By elevating him in death, Hamas transformed vulnerability into propaganda. The silent engineer had become louder in martyrdom than during his hidden life. Diplomatically, condolences poured from Tehran, Doha, and Ankara, each framing his funeral as proof of resistance. Meanwhile, Western governments withheld comment, wary of inflaming tensions. The burial marked not only the end of a man, but the ignition of legend. Yet martyrdom carried consequences. Latif became immortalized in propaganda videos, invoked in recruitment speeches, his blueprints portrayed as sacred texts of resistance. Young engineers pledged to follow his path, ensuring the underground struggle endured despite reduced technical precision. Regionally, his assassination deepened mistrust. Iran intensified support, funneling expertise to fill the gap. Egypt tightened border controls, fearing renewed escalation. Israel, though tactically satisfied, faced strategic paradox. Latif's elimination disrupted tunnels but intensified Hamas's symbolic and ideological defiance. Years later, analysts debated the strike. Some argued it bought Israel breathing room. Others claimed it merely accelerated innovation, forcing Hamas toward drones and cyber tactics. In the end, Latif's death echoed not as conclusion, but as transformation of asymmetric conflict. In the end, Omar Latif's death changed little in the grand scheme of geopolitics. The tunnels continued, wars persisted, and rivalries endured. Yet his elimination revealed something deeper, the invisible hand of states that kill silently beyond borders. The Shah Palace Hotel became another waypoint in espionage's dark atlas. Like Damascus, Dubai, or Amman, Baku entered the ledger of cities where politics turned murderous. Governments disavowed, mourners rallied, but truth stayed buried beneath layers of deniability and secrecy.